Hello, my sweet and sensitive one, and welcome to the Her Temple podcast, a space for supporting sensitive, intuitive, empathic women who want to alchemize residual trauma and blockages from the past into soul power so that you can share more of your intuitive magic with the world, own your sensual and sexual power, liberate your divine feminine body and voice from bondages of intergenerational and patriarchal trauma, and create a legacy of sovereignty for all future generations of women to come. This work is so special, so deep. Thank you for being here. To begin, let's take a nice deep breath together, letting out a sigh. Feeling into the bones of the body, sink into your bones. And let's begin. Hello and welcome, my beloveds, my friends. I am really feeling grateful to be here speaking with you all in this moment. This podcast has been a vision of mine for a few years now and finally is coming into fruition, which is really exciting and sweet to me. I always love having space to share more practices and resources for my students, for my clients, for the women out there who really need to be empowered by not just this information, but the embodiment of information, the deeper access of unlocking this information and wisdom from inside and within your own body, which is the huge root of the work that I really do. And I want to spend this first episode really diving more deeply into what the Her Temple podcast will be offering and what our work here at Her Temple really revolves around, so that you, whether you are aware of our work or new to the platform, so that you can have a better idea of what you're stepping into, of what you're listening to, and what potential awaits for you in being a part of this powerful, beautiful community. So Her Temple is really all about honoring and empowering the temple of your body and your pelvis, your sacred feminine, sexual, sensual power. And a huge core part of the work that we offer through one-on-one sessions, through retreats, through our online community, through our trainings, is this art of the intuitive alchemy, bringing trauma, the energy of trauma, of stagnation, of blockage in the body, alchemizing that into more soul power, bringing on your greatest intuitive, healing, empathic gifts that you were born to express in this lifetime, but sometimes can get blocked or stuck or pushed away from patterns and habits internalized from our patriarchal culture or from the family systems that we grow up in, or internalized belief systems that no longer serve us. All of these more external factors can create pretty deep internal blockages in the nervous system and in the energy field, which is the realm of where I offer most of my work, through the physical body, through the nervous system, through the energy body, and integration of these practices and processes that are designed to awaken your capacity and your ability to self-heal. It's really deep and very powerful work. And in this work, especially when we start to dive into and talk about trauma healing, we can differentiate capital T from lowercase t traumas, which you yourself might already be familiar with, capital T trauma being those very explicitly traumatic experiences from life that are more obvious or more apparent, but then the lowercase t, which are all of the more micro ways that we shut off, that we numb, that we dissociate from perhaps more subtle forms or long-term forms or culturally normalized forms of trauma. And these exist in our systems as well. And this is part of what you have the opportunity to really reprogram so that you can become the woman and the human that you were really born to be, rather than what the culture or what the family system or what your belief system tells you you should be. This is a lot of like learning how to unwind the shoulds in our life so that you can find more liberation and more freedom in and with who you really are. Most of the women drawn to work with me are healers themselves, are women who have these deep healing capacities that exists as intuition and empathy and psychic gifts inside of them. And there's often a disconnect from how do I really hold and embody my intuition without getting caught into more of the fear channels or getting um, caught into my own limiting beliefs or traumas that restrict and hold me back from my ability to express who I truly am. And so I want to explain here in this first episode together the 4 R's that we talk about and that we work with in Her Temple. So they're kind of like the 4 different stages of healing that I tend to work with and that the women and people training under me tend to work with in the realm of somatic yoga therapy. Somatic yoga therapy being the name of the healing process that I offer, somatic meaning relating to, diving into, delving into the soma, the body. Soma means body, but soma is also this word that means the nectar of the gods. It means the divine juice of life. And indeed, we extract that nectar from our bodies. And so, somatic is also a word that to me, you might not find this in like a traditional definition of the term, but it also really is recognizing intuition and embodied intuition. So, not this ethereal intuition that we think is somewhere up and out there, but the intuition that lives inside of your cells, your DNA, inside of the tissues of your body that knows inherently how to self heal. Yoga, of course, is a word that means integration, of bringing together, of holistic union, of restoring balance, communication, and love really between polarized parts of ourselves so that there's no longer an internal battle. A lot of people think of yoga in terms of the postures that we do, and that's a part of it. But I often find in my work that the postures aren't even necessary anymore after a certain point. Once the intuition is really accessed and unlocked, your body just naturally is able to move through these different shapes and postures as needed. And yoga, of course, is a very extensive tradition. Some of you who are yoga teachers may be familiar with this. If not, yoga includes much, much more than just asana. It's philosophy, it's meditation, it's lifestyle, it's a way of being in relationship with the world around you that is connected, that is engaged, that is responsive and intimate. There's an intimacy of self to self, of self to other, of self to the universe. There's an intimacy in this process of yoga. And then therapy, of course, meaning that it's therapeutic, that there's healing involved, that we are going through a process of really looking at what is blocked here and what does this blockage need to be supported, what discharge needs to happen, what unwinding needs to happen, what needs to be released, and also what needs to be brought back in. So somatic yoga therapy is the process that I offer. It's an intuitive healing process, a therapeutic process that I offer in one-on-one work, retreats, events, and of course, I have a whole year-long somatic yoga therapy training where I'm guiding others into how to do this work one-on-one. And in somatic yoga therapy, we have the 4 R's. of healing, the four stages of healing. And the first stage is the rescue stage. And you can think about this in terms of like the firefighting stage, where you're really wanting to put out fires. You're really wanting to attend to physical, tangible, present moment safety. This is not the time to be necessarily starting to like dive into talking about feelings or even processing, because there's still crisis at hand. And so the rescue stage is really about how do we guide our bodies and our life back into a space of safety? How do we create and cultivate more safety, self to self, and how you are with your own self, which might have to do with uh, your self talk. It might have to do with your lifestyle and your routine, the foods that you eat, where you live, these more practical, tangible applications of creating safety. And also creating a more of a sense of groundedness, because trauma and then of course intuitive empathic people tend to have more developed upper chakras and more blockages and stagnation in the lower chakras. And so grounding is the most important thing in this first step, is like, how do we really create more of a sense of groundedness? Again, you can think of this really in terms of practicalities, especially if you're someone coming from a really fresh trauma or who is still living in traumatic experiences, an abusive relationship, for example. This is really the stage where we're focusing on, okay, what needs to happen for me to feel and be an environment that is safe enough? Because we also have to recognize that we as humans are never going to be 100% safe all of the time. There's a risk in existing in our human bodies. Um, there are emotional risks, there are physical risks, there are risks to being human that we can never just completely make disappear. But we can really think about and consider, how do I guide myself into a deeper sense of safety in terms of my boundaries with myself and the world, my sense of groundedness, my sense of security. It's also about creating more ease. The traumatized nervous system is very much oriented to what's wrong, what's going wrong, what's not going good, the bad things that are happening. Of course, naturally, this is part of what happens in the brain and in the nervous system. And as a sensitive person, you might also be more prone to just picking up on those bad vibes more easily than others. And so, this is also about retraining the nervous system once that safety is established to begin to experience some extent, some level of ease. And that ease might even just be neutrality at first if you're, in some pretty big fires that need to be put out. If your nervous system is pretty hijacked into fight or flight or freeze and it's been there for a long time, even just neutrality, that space of like, okay, I may not feel good right now, but I don't feel bad. That in itself can bring a lot of ease to the system. That in itself can feel pleasurable. And so that's a part of what we work with here in the rescue aspect, in the rescue dimension of our healing work. And from there, and I'll also just say, as we're talking about these stages are not linear. They really aren't. They don't work in like a 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of way. We're always kind of ebbing and flowing between them because we're organic as human beings. And you might be in more than one stage at once. So just thinking about that as you hear me speak, you might start to consider, like, where am I at in my own stage of healing? And so the second stage is all about replenishment, nourishing yourself, learning to be sweet and kind to yourself, learning how to go slow and be soft and be gentle. You've gone through a lot, and I know I can say that because you're human. And part of being human is that we go through hard things. We go through experiences of immense and deep grief, of trauma, of abuse, of loss, of heartache, of pain, of rage. You've gone through a lot just by being human, and then add on all of your life experiences on top of that, all of the unique experiences that you've been through that have been perhaps beautiful or perhaps painful or traumatic. We just really want to honor the journey that this body has been through in life. And we honor that by replenishing ourselves. And in this replenishment phase, we're really focusing on building more bandwidth in your system so that with more bandwidth, you can move toward deeper healing work. It's really hard to go through deep emotional releases or to purge past traumas if the bandwidth isn't there. It's possible, but it's a lot harder. It's not nearly as an enjoyable of an experience. So here in this stage, we're working with our Ayurvedic lifestyle tips, dietary changes, self-care habits, and routine that are all about building more bandwidth for you. There's also a lot of sensual explorations in this realm that we offer that are deeply connected with building more bandwidth of replenishing your nervous system, your body, your heart, and your spirit. It's bringing more juice back to you. Trauma is inherently a drying and a depleting and an exhausting process. It is a lot to hold. And so we're gently working on how do we give your system more rest and more replenishment and more nourishment so that you can have more bandwidth to do healing work. That's a big part of what we're doing here. Replenishment looks different for everybody. All of these steps look really different for everybody, but you can think about in terms of this step, what do I do on a daily, weekly, monthly basis to refill my cup? So many of us are stuck in go, go, go mode or in our heads or in habits and patterns that don't really serve us, that especially those of you who are highly sensitive, especially those of you who have survived trauma, this is going to be, these like lifestyle aspects of modern life are going to be extra draining on top of an already depleted or drained nervous system. And through this replenishment, through bringing in more ease, more pleasure to your body, you're also creating more of a barrier, a boundary, a container between yourself and the world around you so that you can feel more held by your own energy, more nourished, more uh, more replenished. That's the entire name of this step. So again, this looks different for everybody, and you might be in this step along with another one. In fact, this step, of course, rescue, creating safety, replenish, creating nourishment, these are important to come back to over and over and over and over again. And if you're like, oh my gosh, I have no idea how to do that, I really recommend that you join our Her Temple Network, which is our online community, because we have a lot of resources there where you'll be able to actually have practices and tools to be able to do this rather than just having this be these more etheric ideas that we're talking about. And you might already have a lot of resources and tools that you can start to think about and apply to support your system in these ways. The third step that we work with is release. Now we're getting to the release work. Now we're getting to the integration. Now we're getting to going and letting go of past imprints and burdens and traumas and blockages in the psyche, in the nervous system, in the heart, in the energy field. All of these patterns, habits, energies that keep you in the way from who you really are, what you really want from your life, how you really want to feel. You were born onto this earth with gifts, with gifts that are completely unique to you and for you, that in their expression, just by you accessing them, just by you expressing them, that is healing in itself on a global level. for your community, for the people around you. It is healing. But we can't access those gifts when these blockages are unattended to, when these wounds are repressed and pushed down under the surface, festering and getting stagnant and stale. No, we heal by bringing our wounds up for air. And that means feeling them. You might have heard the saying, you got to feel it to heal it. That is absolutely true in this case. And we also consider simultaneously, how do we do this work, this release work, this feeling work, this integration work, while still maintaining some sense of ease, of capacity, rather than what many trauma release practices do is just completely flood and overwhelm the system. And there's not an ability to just dip a toe in. Rather, the nervous system goes on a full-on deep dive, and before you know it, you're having a panic attack and getting stuck in that energy of panic. We know that when there's a pattern of getting stuck in something, that the nervous system has gone into overwhelm, which means that we're going too quickly. So this work is slow and it's gentle, and yes, it can feel good. You don't have to believe me right now, but just keep that in your mind as a possibility that healing trauma can feel good. And yes, it might feel painful and uncomfortable, but it also has the capacity and the potential to feel good. That release can feel good. Just like when you've been avoiding crying for a while and you finally let yourself cry and you're just like, whew, I feel so much more like myself now. When we repress our emotions and our energies and our impulses for healing, we're creating deep inner blockages that are exhausting, that create a lot of more protective coping mechanisms and parts that can really be rooted in a lot of resistance and um, a lot of pain and discomfort comes from this in the body and emotionally. And so this work, this release work, is profoundly important, and it's important to have support with this. I really find there are so many blind spots for each of us that through relationship, we're able to see, to feel, to process in just such a different way. And things come up also in the healing relationship that you wouldn't, that wouldn't come up in just self to self. So it is really important from my perspective to do this work with the support of a guide, with the support of someone who can support you in tracking your own nervous system. Are you super overwhelmed and shut down? Are you having the bandwidth to actually stay with this feeling? Just that ability to have a container, that nourishment of another human being there with you, just being there with you. That in itself might sound really scary to some people, and that makes sense. But it's also part of what helps the work integrate more fully and more deeply. So in this release stage, we're really working on letting go of and releasing the past from the body. We're untangling psychic and energetic knots. We're smoothing out the energy field. We're getting rid of foreign energy. We're getting rid of burdens that exist in us in limiting beliefs. We are burning through karmic patterns. We are really processing quite deeply all of the ways, all of the energies that keep you from a full soul embodiment, which leads us into the fourth step, which is reclaim. And reclaim is when your soul has finally planted, rerouted, arrived, grounded back into your body. This is the soul retrieval. This is uh, your soul becoming rooted into your midline. It's really powerful. So when I talk about this, it can become a little bit abstract for some people. And if you're like, what the heck is she talking about? What does she mean with this? Let me explain a little bit deeper. So when there's high sensitivity, and then oftentimes that's met with gaslighting or being told you are too sensitive or too much, when there is a trauma that has not been fully attended to, especially if that has happened in the first 7 years of your life, but later on as well, oftentimes what happens is that the soul, either entirely or parts of the soul, begin to depart from the body. And it's not necessarily that they're going anywhere, they're not lost, um, but they are disembodied. They're kind of out in your energy field rather than rooted in you. So you might feel or experience a certain chakra being more disembodied out of your body. I recently have been really working on bringing my heart back home. Uh, but in general, the soul's home is the midline, which is the channel that runs, an energy channel that runs from the crown of the head to the tip of your tailbone. And this is where we want to invite our soul to come back in and to reside. And it's really hard for the soul to do this when we have protective parts of us that are doing everything they can to keep the soul out of the body, so that that beautiful, pure aspect of you doesn't have to experience the pain of being human anymore. And these parts are kind of misguided, these blockages that come up. We can hold a lot of compassion and love for them, but they don't really see or understand what the soul is super clearly, because if they did, they would realize, remember, and know that the soul is undieable, can't die, can't get sick, can't be wounded, is untouched by trauma. This is the part of you that is untouched by any of your life experiences. It's pure, true you-ness. And that's not to say that you aren't touched by trauma, because your body, your emotions, your heart, all of these things very much are impacted by our human life. And this is part of how that separation can start to occur. There becomes a blockage between your soul qualities and your body. And so, a deep aspect of the work that I do is, how do we bring soul back home into the body? Really powerful. And as we do this, you'll find a deeper connection with your sexuality, which is the divine feminine um, portal and expression of soul. Your power, your purpose, your joy, your will to live, your creativity, all of these start to come into deeper alignment. There's less confusion, less muddiedness, less of a sense of like, why the heck am I here? What the heck am I doing? There's less sense of like overwhelm and taking on other people's energies all of the time and not being able to differentiate what's mine from yours. There is a rootedness when your soul comes home to your body. You also start to reclaim and connect with your gifts, your intuitive gifts, your superpowers in a digestible way, where it's no longer overwhelming or confusing, but it makes sense and you trust that capacity. You trust that ability. So really the release and the reclaim almost always come together, because when we're releasing old energy, there's an invitation through that release to then fill up the space that that energy was taking with your soul once again, inviting the soul back home. And in shamanism, they call this soul retrieval. This is the ability for your soul to root back into your body. So these are the 4 steps that we're working with, sometimes all at once. Sometimes we do all of these steps in one session. Sometimes we spend, months on just one step. It really depends on where your system is at, what your body needs. And if there's one takeaway I could offer you for today, it would be to just sit with and consider where you're at with this and what your body intuitively is asking for in its own process of intuitive healing. And the answer might not come to you immediately or right away, but that's not the point. The point is in the asking of the question. So thank you for listening. I appreciate you. I'm so excited to start this podcast journey together. I have no idea what it fully looks like yet. It might just be me hopping on here and talking every once in a while. I might bring in guests at some point. Who knows? We'll see. I might open up your ability to ask questions and to come on the show. So there's lots of different possibilities and potential here, but I am so excited to be getting started and just really grateful for you to have tuned in. Thank you so much. And I'm sending you deepest love. If you would like to connect more deeply, you can follow me on Instagram. My account is at her.temple.healing. You can also head to my website, hertemplehealing.com, and check out our Her Temple Network, where we have amazing online events from yoga classes to healing workshops, as well as a stellar community of shiny, bright, intuitive humans, a really special space. You can check out our trauma alchemy training if you're interested in becoming a somatic yoga therapy practitioner and learning more about how to do this work, whether that just be for yourself or be for your community as a healer. And you can apply for one-on-one healing sessions. If I have availability, I will get back to you. And if there's a wait list, you'll also be able to see that there. So grateful for you to have tuned in, and I'll connect with you again soon. Thanks so much for listening. If you loved this episode, please leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcasts and share with a friend. It's really helpful for me as I start to grow this platform to have your assistance in spreading the word and sharing the love. Thank you so much.